My kitchen has always been a sanctuary for me. It's simple, but it's mine. At 78 years old, with silver hair pinned neatly atop my head, I have come to realize that the days I spend in this room are the best part of my life now. I am at peace here. There's a stillness, a rhythm to the routine I follow. Watering my plants, kneading dough, watching the kettle boil. The smell of fresh herbs fills the air, a reminder that my hands still have purpose. And it's not just about the food, though it's an important part. It's about the care, the love, the memory of a time when life was much simpler. It wasn't always this way, though. There was a time when the kitchen was just a place to survive, just like every other room in the house. A place where my heart didn't rest, a place where my mind couldn't find solace. But now every corner here tells a story of resilience, of strength, and of survival. As I knead the dough, I remember how long it took me to feel the calm that fills this room now. It wasn't always easy. In fact, there was a summer long ago when I truly thought I wouldn't survive. It was the summer that everything changed, a summer I will never forget. A summer that for me would mark the difference between losing myself and finding the strength to fight back. It was a family reunion, you know? I remember the campgrounds were full of laughter and noise, the kind you expect when families get together. People setting up tents, unloading coolers, children running around, their giggles drifting on the summer breeze. The sun was high, casting everything in a golden glow. Caleb, my cousin, arrived later than most. Of course, he was always the one who made an entrance. He walked up with that wide grin, his arms full of beer, always the life of the party. To everyone else, Caleb was a hero, the man who could do no wrong, the man everyone wanted to be around. He was the center of attention, and he loved it. But to me, even now at 78, the mere thought of him presses against my chest, like a heavy stone I can't move. As I watched him from across the camp, I couldn't escape that feeling, the one that told me I was never safe when he was near. Everyone loved him, but I knew him in a different way. I knew what he was capable of, what he had done before. He wore a mask, and it was a mask I had seen far too many times to trust. The night after Caleb arrived, I lay in my tent, trying to sleep. The sound of crickets filled the air. The trees creaked as the wind passed through them, and somewhere in the distance the lake whispered. But I couldn't sleep. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That feeling settled deep inside me, making my heart race faster than it should. And then I heard it, the zipper of my tent moving, a soft rustle in the night just outside the flap. I closed my eyes, pretending to sleep, but I knew what was happening. The next morning, I woke up to find my blouse torn at the shoulder, a bruise forming on my collarbone, my scarf damp with something I couldn't name. The memories of the night were fragmented like pieces of a broken mirror. I couldn't make sense of them. The smell of liquor still lingered in the air, but I couldn't piece it all together. I didn't want to. I didn't have to. I didn't need to speak of it. Not yet. But then Caleb came to breakfast as if nothing had happened. He was sitting across from me, his smile wide and carefree. He asked in that same light-hearted way if I had slept well, and everyone laughed. The whole family laughed. No one looked at me the way they used to, the way I needed them to. Instead, they glanced at me with pity, as if the old woman had gotten confused in her sleep, as if it was nothing but a mistake, just a misunderstanding. But I knew what had happened. And though I couldn't speak it, I felt the weight of it press down on me. He had already rewritten the story. He had already made his move. It wasn't enough for Caleb to have his way in the quiet corners of the night. No, he needed to twist everything to make sure no one would believe me. The next morning, as we sat down for pancakes, he began his performance. He joked casually about how I had been restless the night before, wandering around the campground, acting confused. He even laughed as if it were all some big joke. And of course, the family laughed with him, the sound echoing around me, drowning out my voice, drowning out my truth. They all thought it was funny. Some of them even glanced at me with that look, the one you give an elderly relative who might be slipping a little, who's starting to forget things. But I wasn't confused. I wasn't losing my mind. I wasn't misremembering. What happened last night was clear to me, even if the rest of them couldn't see it. Later, when we were alone by the fire, Caleb leaned in close, his breath hot against my skin. His voice dropped to a whisper, too loud for comfort, but soft enough to avoid the notice of anyone else around. He told me to remember. You fell, remember? Don't embarrass yourself. His grip on my wrist was tight, like a vice, but as soon as someone passed by, he let go, grinning as if nothing had happened. But I felt it. I felt his control. The way he made me doubt myself. The way he twisted everything to his favor. He made it seem like I was the problem, like I was the one who was losing it. And I realized, with a sinking feeling, that no one would ever question him. Not in front of everyone. Not when he was the charming, funny cousin, always the center of attention, always the life of the party. He had woven himself into the fabric of this family, and no one would see through him. Not unless I found a way to make them. The next few days, Caleb stayed close. Too close. He followed me around, sat next to me at meals, made sure he was always within arm's reach. He played the role of the concerned family member, the protective cousin, making it seem like he was just looking out for me, that he was the only one who could help me. But I saw through it. I saw the game he was playing. It wasn't protection. It was control. Every time I tried to pull away, he masked it as a joke, a laugh, a casual comment that made everyone else think I was overreacting. He laughed it off, but I saw the way his eyes narrowed when no one was looking, the way his smile faded when no one was around. I realized that no one was going to intervene. No one was going to notice, not unless I did something. I couldn't depend on anyone else to save me. So I started watching. Quietly, subtly, I began observing those around me. Who was uncomfortable when Caleb made one of his jokes? Who rolled their eyes when he acted like the life of the party? Who avoided him? I started to notice the little signs, the cracks in his armor. He wasn't as untouchable as he thought. Not everyone bought into his charm, and that gave me hope. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I felt. As the days passed, memories from my childhood resurfaced, uninvited but insistent. I remembered how it always had been with Caleb. Those family gatherings when I was younger, locked doors, muffled cries in the dead of night, whispers that stopped the moment you walked into the room. And Caleb was always there, always the one at the center of it. He wasn't the only one, but he was the one I feared most. And the silence from the rest of the family, the way they avoided the subject, the way they turned a blind eye, it was all coming back to me. The threats, the whispered words, no one will believe you. It was the same song, the same dance, just with a new set of eyes watching it all unfold. And then I saw Mara, my niece, her face twisting in discomfort as Caleb passed too close, his hand brushing against her arm as he moved by. And just like that, I realized, this wasn't just about me. This wasn't just my story. It never had been. Caleb's abuse had been a generational thing, passed down, repeated. And I had spent my whole life thinking I was the only one. I was wrong. The cycle had never ended. It had just been hiding, waiting for the right moment to come back. One evening, just as the sun was dipping behind the horizon, Caleb came for me. I was by the lake, looking at the water, trying to clear my mind when he appeared beside me. His hand closed around my arm with a force that made my skin prickle. He leaned in, his face too close, and his voice was low and menacing. "Don't start your stories," he warned. "No one believed you then, and no one will now. You'll just sound senile." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. But inside, something shifted. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt something other than fear. I felt anger, a quiet, simmering rage that was building inside me. I wanted to lash out, to scream, to make him pay, but I knew better than that. Caleb wasn't the type of man who could be confronted directly. He was too slippery, too protected by his family's image, but I could find another way. I could play the long game, and that's exactly what I did. It started small, barely noticeable to anyone else, but every action I took, every word I dropped, was a tiny rebellion, a flicker of something that felt like power after so many years of silence. I didn't have the strength to confront him head on, not yet, but I knew I could do more than sit back and let him control the narrative. I began to use the one thing I still had, my voice, even if it was quiet, even if it was just in passing. One evening, as Caleb told a story about his latest gambling escapades, I let slip a casual comment about the debts he owed. It wasn't loud, wasn't confrontational, but I saw the way the other cousin's eyes flickered toward him just for a moment. The briefest of pauses that told me they'd heard. The cracks were starting to show. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make him uncomfortable, enough to make him start doubting himself, to wonder if his perfect facade was slipping. The next time he made one of his cruel jokes about a family member's failed marriage, I mentioned it to another cousin as if it were an afterthought. The subtlety of it was almost poetic. I wasn't shouting or demanding justice. I was planting seeds. And like any good gardener, I watched those seeds take root, felt the slight shifts in the air around him. Caleb, for the first time in years, didn't have everything under control, and that made me feel something I hadn't in a long time. Hope. By the time the first week of the reunion had passed, I'd started something that would be my weapon, a small, unassuming notebook. At first, it was nothing more than a way to record the details. The times, the dates, the conversations, the words Caleb used. But soon it became more. It became a record of survival. It became proof that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't imagining the way he made me feel small or the way he twisted everything I said. I wrote in that notebook late at night, when the camp had gone silent, when the laughter had faded, and the shadows in my tent grew long and dark. Each word I wrote was like a tiny act of defiance. It was my reminder that even if no one else saw it, I knew the truth. I could build my case, piece by piece, until the day came when I didn't have to whisper any longer. The notebook was a quiet weapon, one no one could take from me. It wasn't enough to stop Caleb's cruel actions right away, but it was enough to keep me grounded. It was enough to remind me that I wasn't alone in this, and someday someone would listen. As the days went on, Caleb's grip on the family began to slip. I could see it in the way he started to lose his temper more easily, in the way his jokes turned sharper, more biting. He began mocking me more openly, and the things he said were meant to make me feel small, meant to isolate me. But it wasn't just me. He started to lash out at others, too. He'd raise his voice when someone didn't agree with him, grab their arm too roughly when they said something he didn't like. And that was when I noticed it. People were starting to notice. It was subtle at first, a side glance here, a hushed word there. But the cracks in Caleb's carefully crafted image were widening. He was wasn't the charming cousin anymore. He wasn't the man everyone adored. People were starting to whisper, and every time someone looked away when he snapped at me, or every time they shifted uncomfortably when he spoke to someone else with that same cruel smile, I felt something shift in the air. Caleb, for the first time in a long time, wasn't untouchable anymore. And that's when I knew it was time. It happened during the storm, a violent, sudden rainstorm that drenched everything in its path. Everyone was scrambling to get inside, to escape the torrents that poured down from the sky. But I saw my opportunity. Caleb, as always, was distracted. He was too busy trying to keep up appearances with some of the cousins, acting as though he hadn't just been bullying me the whole time. I waited until the camp had emptied, until most of the family had retreated to their tents. Then I did it. I left one of Caleb's old notes, a note filled with subtle threats and manipulations where another cousin could find it. It wasn't obvious, it wasn't loud, but it was enough. Enough to ignite something. Enough to make someone question everything they thought they knew about Caleb. And that was when the accusations came. They didn't come with a bang, but with a quiet, inevitable rumble. The shouting, the fury, the exposure. Caleb lost it. He couldn't keep the mask up any longer, and for the first time in my life I saw him unravel. He screamed, his usual smooth charm turning into pure rage, his carefully built reputation crumbling in front of everyone. It was over. The family fractured, split down the middle. Some defended him, but even they began to falter. It wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to hold his walls together anymore. And that, more than anything, made me feel something deep inside me. Relief. When the storm cleared, the camp was in chaos. Caleb, drunk and furious, had retreated to his tent, and for the first time, the weight of everything that had happened felt lighter. I took only my notebook, the small one I had hidden for so long, and a bag. The rain had soaked through my shoes, but I didn't care. I walked down the muddy trail, barefoot, the storm still swirling in the air around me. Every step was a refusal to ever go back. Every step was a declaration. I was done. I wasn't going to let him control me anymore. I didn't look back, not even once. I kept walking, my heart steady, my mind clear. The ranger station was the first safe place I found, and I was met there with a warmth I hadn't known in years. They didn't ask questions. They didn't need to. They saw the fear, the trembling, and they just listened. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't need to explain. I didn't need to justify myself. I was believed. And that, more than anything, was the beginning of my freedom. I don't think I had ever known a moment of peace quite like the one I felt when I was found at that ranger station. I was drenched, trembling, but there was something else too, something I hadn't felt in years. Safety. The ranger didn't ask me to tell him everything right away. He didn't pry. He just gave me a blanket, offered me a hot drink, and asked if I needed anything. I had no answers to give. I had no words to explain everything I'd been through. But when he finally spoke again, it was simple. Are you ready to go home? Home. That word, that promise, was something I hadn't even dared to imagine for so long. But when I looked at the ranger, I knew. I didn't need to go back to that campground. I didn't need to return to the place where Caleb's eyes still haunted me. I wasn't going back to a life of silence, to a life of being controlled and gaslit. No, I wasn't going back. And so when he asked me, I simply replied, yes. I'm ready. I was ready for the truth to be heard, for someone to listen to me, finally, without skepticism, for the weight of Caleb's lies to be stripped away. That moment with the ranger and the quiet certainty of his understanding, was all I needed to begin the process of healing. For the first time, I didn't have to justify my pain. When I was finally able to speak, to open the pages of that small notebook I'd kept hidden for so long, it all came out. Every name, every incident, every twisted word Caleb had ever said to me, to others, every secret was there, written in ink, never to be erased. Mara, my niece, found it. The truth wasn't hidden anymore, not in the shadows, not in whispered threats. I could see the change in Mara's eyes the moment she read my notebook. She didn't ask for confirmation. She didn't need to. She confronted Caleb in front of everyone. The words she spoke were sharp, filled with fury that she had bottled up for years. "You've been doing this all along," she told him, her voice trembling with righteous anger. "And we let you. We all let you." Her words echoed through the camp, louder than any of Caleb's jokes, louder than his carefully curated lies. The family split right then and there. Some rushed to defend him, but more and more I saw their hesitance, their doubt. Caleb had been exposed, and his power began to dissolve in the face of the truth. His once unshakable reputation began to crumble, piece by piece, until nothing remained but the wreckage of his manipulation. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid to look him in the eyes. I saw him for what he truly was, just another man, broken and small when exposed to the light. It wasn't sudden, not the way you might expect a dramatic moment of clarity. But after the storm, after the chaos, I found myself back where I started, in the quiet comfort of my own space, back in my kitchen, with the smell of fresh herbs and warm bread filling the air. I had my plants to water, my dough to knead, my little routine that had once been my solace, and now was something far more meaningful. I had survived. But survival was only the beginning. It wasn't just about enduring the storm. It was about rebuilding, about finding peace in the simplest things again. The sound of rain against the window, the scent of fresh basil in the garden, the hum of the kettle as it began to boil. And when Mara visited, bringing soup and stories of what had happened after Caleb left, I felt a warmth inside that had been missing for so long. "I never thought I'd make it here," I told her one evening, closing the notebook that I had once used to track the lies, to keep my truth safe. This time it wasn't full of secrets. It was filled with moments of joy, small and quiet, like the flicker of a candle in the dark. "They told me no one would believe me," I said softly, my fingers brushing over the pages. "But I believed myself. That's what saved me." And it was true. I had saved myself. Not in some grand heroic way, but in the small, quiet moments where I chose to speak my truth, where I chose to leave the lies behind, where I chose to walk away, even when everything seemed impossible. I am free now, not just from Caleb, but from everything that had kept me trapped for so long. I wasn't the same person who had arrived at that lakeside camping trip. I had been changed, shaped by the strength I didn't know I had inside me. I was living proof that even the quietest acts of resistance, even the smallest steps toward freedom, could change everything.